The message came on a Tuesday morning when most of Earth was still sleeping. Admiral Jiho Kim was drinking his second cup of coffee in the Terra Defense Command Center when the long-range communications array started screaming. The sound was unlike anything the technicians had heard before. It cut through the usual static of deep space like a knife through paper. "Sir, we're getting a signal," called out Lieutenant Hayes, his voice tight with confusion. It's coming from everywhere at once. Every satellite, every deep space monitor, every communication device on the planet. Jiho set down his coffee cup and walked to the main display screen. Around him, dozens of operators worked frantically. At their stations, red lights blinked across the command center like angry eyes. "Put it through," Jiho said. The screen flickered once, then filled with an image that made everyone in the room freeze. A massive crystalline chamber stretched out before them, so large that the far walls disappeared into misty distance. Strange. Lights danced along the crystal surfaces, casting rainbow patterns that hurt to look at directly. In the center of this impossible space stood a creature that was almost like a human, but wrong in ways that made the mind struggle to understand. It was tall and thin, with skin that seemed to change color as it moved. Its eyes were too large and too bright, and when it smiled, there were too many teeth. "Greetings, primitive species of the third planet," the creature said. Its voice was smooth and cold, like ice sliding down glass. "I am Representative Velthari of the Galactic Council Hegemony. Your species has recently achieved faster-than-light travel. This makes you subject to Council authority." Jiho felt his blood turn cold. Around the command center, he could hear people whispering prayers in a dozen different languages. The creature continued speaking as if it was reading from a shopping list. "You will provide 60% of your planet's resources to the Council Treasury. You will provide 40% of your population to serve as workers in Council territories. You will submit all military forces to Council oversight. You will accept a Council governor to rule your world." Behind Velthari, other shapes moved in the crystal chamber. Some looked like giant insects. Others were flowing masses that seemed to be made of living metal. Still others defied description entirely. All of them watched the transmission with the bored expressions of creatures who had done this many times before. "This is standard procedure," Velthari said, and now there was something like amusement in its voice. 847 species have joined the Council family. All have found their proper place in our civilization. You will do the same. The screen showed a star map that made Jiho's knees weak. Thousands of solar systems glowed with the soft blue light that marked Council territory. The space around Earth looked tiny and insignificant, like a single grain of sand on an endless beach. "Your species has 30 rotations to provide your acceptance," Velthari said. The creature's smile grew wider, showing more of those terrible teeth. "The Council looks forward to your compliance." The transmission ended. The command center fell silent except for the soft humming of computers and the sound of people trying not to panic. Jiho turned to his communications officer. "Get me President Santos? Get me the UN Security Council? Get me every world leader who can answer a phone." He paused, looking at the blank screen where the alien had been. "And find Chief Diplomat Una Park and Strategic Advisor Minho Lee. Tell them to get here now." The next 6 hours passed in a blur of emergency meetings and frantic phone calls. World leaders appeared on screens from every continent, their faces showing the same mixture of fear and disbelief that Jiho felt in his own chest. Una Park arrived first. Her usually perfect diplomat's composure cracked like broken glass. She had seen the transmission at the UN building in New York and had caught the first military transport to Colorado. "How bad is it?" she asked as she entered Jiho's office. "See for yourself," Jiho said and played the recording again. Una watched in silence, her face growing paler with each word Velthari spoke. When it ended, she sat down heavily in a chair. 60% of our resources," she said quietly. 40% of our people. They're not asking for tribute. They're asking for slavery. Minho Lee arrived 20 minutes later, carrying a tablet full of calculations that made no sense and all the sense in the world. He had been Earth's top strategic analyst for 15 years, the man who figured out what enemies would do before they knew it themselves. "I've been running numbers," he said without preamble. "Population figures, resource estimates, military capabilities. Want to know what I found?" Jiho and Yuna waited. "They're not bluffing," Minho said. "Look at this." He showed them his tablet, covered with charts and graphs. 847 species under council control. If even half of them have populations like ours, we're looking at trillions of beings. Their combined military might would be... He shook his head. "We have 47 combat-capable ships. They'd probably have hundreds of thousands. What about allies?" Yuna asked. "Other species who might help us?" Minho's laugh was bitter. "Did you see that star map? Every species that could help us is already under council control. We're alone." The three of them sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the tablet full of impossible numbers. Outside the office windows, the Colorado mountains looked the same as they always had. It was hard to believe that alien eyes were probably watching Earth from the darkness between stars. "So what do we do?" Yuna asked finally. Jiho stood up and walked to the window. Somewhere up there, beyond the blue sky and white clouds, creatures from nightmares were waiting for humanity's answer. They had given Earth 30 days to choose between slavery and destruction. "We call an emergency session of the World Council," he said. "We tell them everything, and then ... He turned back to face his two closest advisors. "Then we figure out what humans do when someone tells them they have no choice." The countdown had begun. 29 days had passed since the Galactic Council's demand. 29 days of meetings that went nowhere, plans that fell apart, and sleepless nights for everyone who knew the truth. Admiral Jiho Kim stood in the same command center where he had first seen Valthari's face. The alien's words still echoed in his mind. 60% of Earth's resources, 40% of humanity as slaves. Complete surrender in exchange for being allowed to live. The past month had been the longest of his life. World leaders had argued for weeks. Some wanted to negotiate, hoping to reduce the tribute to something less crushing. Others wanted to run, to load colony ships and scatter humanity across distant stars before the aliens could stop them. A few had even suggested surrender, pointing to the impossible odds they faced, but in the end, they had reached the same conclusion that Jiho had known from the beginning. There was no negotiating with creatures who saw humans as nothing more than resources to be harvested. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Galactic Council," called out Lieutenant Hayes. His voice was steadier now than it had been a month ago. Everyone had gotten used to living with fear. "Put them through," Jiho said. The main screen flickered to life, showing the same crystal chamber as before. But now there were more creatures present. Dozens of different alien species filled the space, all watching with the lazy interest of beings who had seen this scene hundreds of times before. Valthari stood in the center, looking exactly the same as he had 30 days ago. His two bright eyes found the camera, and his mouth curved in that terrible smile. "Greetings, humans of the third planet," he said in that smooth, cold voice. "The 30 rotations have passed. The Council is prepared to receive your acceptance of our generous terms." Behind him, other aliens shifted and whispered among themselves. Jiho could see what looked like a massive insect cleaning its mandibles with delicate precision. Something that might have been made of living shadow watched with eyes like burning coals. A creature covered in metallic scales counted things on its clawed fingers. "We have prepared the necessary documentation for your tribute payments," Valthari continued. "Collection vessels are already moving toward your system. They will arrive within 10 rotations to begin the transfer of resources and population." The alien paused, and his smile grew wider. "The Council acknowledges that this process may cause some disruption to your primitive society. This is normal. All species experience difficulty adjusting to their proper place in galactic civilization." Jiho looked around the command center. Chief Diplomat Una Park stood to his right, her face calm and professional despite everything. Strategic Advisor Minho Lee was at his left, holding a data pad that contained every military assessment, every population count, every calculation that had brought them to this moment. Behind them, dozens of Earth's best and brightest worked. At their stations, these were the people who had spent a month trying to find a way out of an impossible situation. They had run every scenario, explored every option, and reached the same conclusion every time. There was no way to win. There was no way to run. There was no way to hide, but there was still one thing they could do. "The Council waits for your response," Valthari said. There was boredom in his voice now, the tone of someone going through a routine that had become tedious through repetition. "Please state your acceptance of Council authority." Jiho stepped forward toward the camera. Around the command center, every person stopped what they were doing and turned to watch. This was the moment that would define humanity's future, for however long that future might last. He thought about his daughter, studying engineering at Seoul National University. He thought about his elderly parents who had survived wars and famines and built a better world for their children. He thought about every human being on Earth, living their lives, loving their families, dreaming their dreams. The Galactic Council wanted to take all of that away. They wanted to turn humans into slaves, Earth into a resource mine, humanity's future into nothing more than a footnote in someone else's history. "The United Earth Government has reviewed your demands," Jiho said clearly. His voice carried to every corner of the command center and through the quantum communication array, to every corner of the galaxy. In the crystal chamber, the aliens leaned forward slightly. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the moment when another species would bow down and accept their place as servants. Jiho looked directly into the camera, directly into Valthari's two bright eyes, directly into the faces of creatures who had conquered 847 worlds. "Our response is no?" He reached out and cut the transmission. For a moment, the command center was completely silent. Then someone started clapping. Others joined in until the sound filled the room like thunder. But Jiho barely heard it. He was thinking about what came next. Somewhere in the crystal chamber, billions of miles away, the Galactic Council was dealing with something that had never happened before in their 12,000 years of existence. For the first time, a species had not just refused their demands, they had refused to negotiate at all. Una Park moved to stand beside him. "That was either the bravest thing anyone has ever done," she said quietly, "or the stupidest." "Maybe both," Jiho replied. He looked around the command center at all the faces watching him with expressions of fear and hope and desperate pride. "Minho, how long do we have?" Minho Lee checked his data pad. "Based on their previous patterns, I'd estimate they'll send a punishment fleet within a week. Probably a small one at first. They'll want to make an example of us without using too many resources. How small is small? 200 ships, maybe 300, standard intimidation force?" Jiho nodded. Against Earth's 47 combat vessels, even a small alien fleet would be overwhelming, but numbers weren't everything. The aliens had grown used to easy victories, to species that surrendered before the first shot was fired. They had never fought humans before. "Send word to all fleet commanders," Jiho said. "Tell them to prepare their ships, and send a message to every space-capable nation on Earth." He paused, looking once more at the blank screen where Valthari's face had been. "Tell them that humanity has just declared war on the galaxy." The countdown to battle had begun. The massive alien stood in the Council's military command center, his forearms crossed over his chitinous chest. His species had conquered 37 worlds for the Council, and he had never lost a single battle. This human situation was beneath his notice. 200 ships should be more than enough, he told Valthari through gritted mandibles. "I used the same force to break the Kepler resistance 3 cycles ago. These humans will surrender after we destroy a few of their cities." Valthari's face showed the alien equivalent of embarrassment. In 12,000 years of Council history, no species had ever simply said no to their demands. The other council members were asking uncomfortable questions about his handling of the situation. "Make it quick," Velthari said. "The council wants this mistake corrected before other species get ideas." Thokmar's laugh sounded like grinding metal. "It will be over in hours." But on Earth, Commander Taeyun Kang had spent the past week turning humanity's disadvantage into something else entirely. Taeyun stood on the bridge of the UES Incheon, flagship of the Seoul Defense Fleet. Around him, the asteroid belt stretched out like a three-dimensional minefield. For the past 7 days, human ships had been moving rocks, planting explosives, and setting up the kind of trap that only a species used to being outgunned could imagine. "Sir, long-range sensors are picking up the enemy fleet," reported his tactical officer. 200 ships, just like intelligence predicted. "They're coming in fast and confident." Taeyun nodded. "That confidence would be their weakness. Signal all ships," he said. "Phase 1 is a go. Remember, we're not trying to win a fair fight. We're trying to make them wish they'd never heard of Earth." The alien fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. Their ships were beautiful in a terrifying way, smooth curves of metal and energy that looked more like living creatures than machines. Each one was 3 times the size of humanity's largest warship. Admiral Kethver, commanding the fleet, from his flagship, studied the primitive human formations with something like pity. 47 small ships clustered around Earth's moon, looking lost and helpless in the vast darkness of space. "This will not even be a battle," he told his crew. "Advance in standard formation. Destroy half their ships, then broadcast surrender terms." But as the alien fleet moved deeper into the solar system, Taeyun was already executing a plan that no civilized species would have considered. "Detonate the first field," he ordered. Suddenly, space around the alien fleet exploded. Not from weapons, but from thousands of asteroid fragments that had been rigged with mining charges and positioned along the enemy's route. The aliens had scanners that could detect ships and energy weapons, but they weren't looking for rocks. The explosions didn't destroy any alien ships, but they filled space with debris and sensor static. For the first time in the battle, Admiral Kethver felt a flicker of concern. "What are they doing?" he demanded. His answer came as human ships emerged from the asteroid belt like wolves from a forest. They moved in patterns that made no sense to conventional military thinking, splitting up, using debris for cover, attacking from impossible angles. The Incheon led the charge, firing missiles that shouldn't have been able to penetrate alien shields. But human engineers had spent a month studying captured council technology, and Kyung-Oh's research teams had found something interesting. The shields were designed to stop energy weapons and kinetic projectiles, but they had trouble with weapons that did both at the same time. "Nuclear-tipped kinetic penetrators," Taeyun said with satisfaction as his missiles punched through an alien cruiser's defenses. "Sometimes the old ways are the best ways." The alien fleet tried to respond with their superior firepower, but the humans weren't fighting the way civilized species were supposed to fight. They used the moon's gravity to slingshot around it at impossible speeds. They hid inside clouds of metallic chaff that made targeting impossible. They fired from behind asteroids and then disappeared before return fire could reach them. Worst of all, they seemed to be enjoying it. "These humans fight like pirates," Admiral Kethver said in disgust as another of his ships took critical damage from an attack that had come from 3 directions at once. "Sir, we're losing ships faster than we're destroying theirs," his tactical officer reported. "Recommend we withdraw and call for reinforcements." But Kethver's pride wouldn't let him retreat from primitives. "All ships, full advance. Overwhelm them with firepower." It was exactly what Taeyun had been hoping for. "Phase 2, he ordered. "Spring the trap." The alien fleet charged forward, directly into the killing field that humanity had spent a week preparing. Hidden weapons platforms activated throughout the asteroid belt. Ships that had been disguised as debris suddenly came alive with weapons. Fire. The carefully positioned rocks that had seemed random revealed themselves as the walls of a maze designed to channel the enemy into overlapping fields of fire. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Kethver found himself outmaneuvered. By creatures he had considered barely intelligent, the battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Human ships darted through the asteroid field like fighters in a three-dimensional city, using every piece of cover, every gravitational anomaly, every dirty trick that a species raised on a world full of predators could imagine. The aliens had superior technology, but humans had something else: the bitter knowledge that this was a fight for their species' survival. Every ship that died took a piece of humanity with it, and every alien ship destroyed was a small victory against impossible odds. When the battle ended 6 hours later, space around Earth was filled with debris from both fleets. Of the 200 alien ships that had entered the solar system, only 37 escaped to carry word back to the Galactic Council. Of humanity's 47 ships, 23 remained operational. Taiyun sat in his damaged command chair, looking at the tactical display that showed the scattered remains of the alien fleet. His ship was venting atmosphere from a dozen hull breaches, and half his crew was injured, but they had won. "Send a message to Terra Defense Command," he said. "Tell Admiral Jiho that the Council's punishment fleet has been discouraged." But even as Earth celebrated its impossible victory, Taiyun knew this was only the beginning. The aliens would come again, and next time they would come prepared. The question was, would humanity be ready for them? The crystal chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. Valthari stood in the center of the vast space. His usually perfect composure cracked like broken glass. Around him, representatives from 847 species watched in stunned silence. The holographic display above them showed the impossible truth: Admiral Kethver's fleet, scattered and broken around a small yellow star at the edge of nowhere, for 12,000 years. The Council had been undefeated. Species might resist at first, but they always surrendered when they saw the true power arrayed against them. No primitive world had ever actually fought back and won until now. "Explain this," demanded Archon Zephyrin, the Council's supreme leader. The ancient being's voice carried the weight of millennia, and when it spoke, even the most powerful species representatives fell silent. Valthari's mouth worked soundlessly for a moment. How could he explain the impossible? How could he tell the Council that a species with 47 ships had destroyed or crippled 200 of their vessels, the humans... "They fought differently," he said finally. "They used tactics that violated all civilized rules of warfare. They hid among debris. They used their own planetary system as a weapon. They fought like dyke animals." A ripple of unease passed through the assembled representatives. Several species shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The insectoid hegemony clicked their mandibles in distress. The energy beings of the Covenant flickered with anxious patterns, but Archon Zephyrn's reaction was different. The ancient being's crystalline form pulsed with dark light, and when it spoke, ice seemed to form in the air around its words. "Then we will teach them the price of defying civilized order," it said. "General Thokmar, you will assemble the largest fleet in Council history, 10,000 ships, representatives from every member species. We will not merely defeat these humans, we will erase them so completely that no species will ever again dare to say no to the Council." General Thokmar, still smarting from the failure of his small punishment fleet, bowed his massive head. "It will be done, Archon. But some species may resist contributing their full quotas. The defeat has unsettled certain member worlds." And indeed, as news of the human victory spread through the galaxy's communication networks, something unprecedented was happening. For the first time in Council history, member species were questioning their rulers. On the water world of Nereid Prime, Ambassador Haniel Jang received her first secret communication from an alien species. The message came through channels so deeply encrypted that Earth's best cryptographers needed 3 days to decode it. "To the humans of the third planet," the message read, "we are the Aquatic Federation of Nereid. We have served the Council for 600 years. We watched your battle through our deep space sensors. We wish to know, how did you find the courage to say no? Similar messages began arriving from across the galaxy. The tree-like botanists of the forest worlds. The silicon-based miners of the crystal colonies. Even some of the original founder species began sending carefully worded inquiries through diplomatic backchannels on Earth. Chief Diplomat Una Park found herself busier than she had ever been in her life. Her office in the rebuilt UN building was filled with translation equipment and secure communication arrays. Every day brought new contacts from species who had heard about humanity's impossible victory. "This is unprecedented," she told Admiral Jiho Kim during one of their daily briefings. "In 1 month, we've received contact from over 60 species. Some are offering information about Council fleet movements. Others want to know about our weapons technology. A few are asking if we would accept them as allies." Jiho studied the star chart spread across his desk. Red markers showed the positions of Council fleets assembling for what intelligence was calling the Extermination Armada. But scattered among the red were new blue markers, species that had made contact with Earth, species that were beginning to question 12,000 years of Council rule. "What's our assessment?" he asked Strategic Advisor Minho Lee. Minho looked tired. The past month had aged him years as he worked around the clock to understand the shifting galactic situation. "It's complicated," he said. "The good news is that our victory has created cracks in the Council's authority. Species that have been oppressed for centuries are starting to believe that resistance is possible. And the bad news? The Council is assembling the largest military force in galactic history. 10,000 ships, Admiral. Even with allies, we can't match that kind of firepower." But Una was studying a different kind of report, intelligence gathered from their new alien contacts. "Maybe we don't need to match it," she said slowly. "Look at this. The Council is demanding massive ship contributions from every member species, but a lot of them are sending their oldest vessels, their most unreliable crews. Some are even sabotaging their own contributions." She pulled up a holographic display showing the Council's force structure. The Botanical Confederacy sent ships with faulty life support systems. The Aquatic Federation's vessels have been fitted with navigation computers that will mysteriously fail at crucial moments. Even some of the founder species are contributing. Ships that are decades past their prime. Jiho felt the first spark of hope he had experienced since this all began. They're not just questioning the Council, they're actively undermining it. "More than that," Minho added, consulting his tablet. "We're getting reports of protests on Council worlds. Work slowdowns on member planets. 3 species have actually recalled their representatives from the Council chambers, claiming they need to consult with their home governments. But even as Earth's leaders dared to hope, the reports coming in from deep space were sobering. The Council's response to the growing unrest was predictably brutal. Entire planets were being placed under martial law. Species that showed signs of rebellion found their food shipments delayed, their trade routes blocked, their communications monitored. On the world of Kara 7, the native population had made the mistake of celebrating humanity's victory too openly. Council enforcers had responded by confiscating half the planet's harvest and doubling their tribute requirements. The message was clear. This is what happens when you support the humans. They're trying to use fear to keep their empire together. Una observed during another late-night strategy session. But it's not working the way it used to. Every act of repression just creates more resentment. The question is whether that resentment will translate into action when the fighting starts, Jiho said. He stood at the window of his office, looking up at the night sky. Somewhere up there, 10,000 alien warships were moving toward Earth, like a tide of destruction. We need to send a message to our contacts, he decided. Not asking for help, we can't put them at risk like that. But we need them to know that we're not giving up. That when the Council fleet arrives, we'll still be fighting. What kind of message? Una asked. Jiho turned back to face his advisors. Tell them that 1 month ago, Earth said no to the Galactic Council. When their fleet arrives, we're going to say it again. And we're going to keep saying it until every species in the galaxy knows that there's an alternative to bowing down. As Earth prepared for the coming storm. Messages began flowing out through the galaxy's secret communication networks. They carried a simple promise from the small blue world that had dared to defy an empire. We are still here. We are still fighting. We are still free, and for species that had forgotten what freedom meant, those words carried more power than any weapon. The Council's extermination armada dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system like a metal storm. 10,000 ships stretched across space in a formation so vast that it took Earth sensors 15 minutes just to count them all. Admiral Jiho Kim stood in the Terra Defense Command Center, watching the tactical display with the calm of a man who had already accepted his fate. Beside him, Commander Taeyun Kang studied the enemy formations with the eye of someone who had spent 3 months preparing for this moment. "They're not taking any chances this time," Taeyun observed. "Full battle formation, overlapping fields, a fire, sensor nets that cover every possible approach route. They learned from our last encounter." "But so did we," Jiho replied, "and so did our friends." The past 3 months had changed everything. What had started as Earth's desperate last stand had become something much larger. Across the galaxy, species that had been council subjects for centuries were rising up, some openly, others in secret, but all of them inspired by the impossible victory of a small blue world that had refused to bow down. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Council fleet," reported Lieutenant Hayes. "Put it through." The main screen showed a familiar crystal chamber, but this time it was filled with even more alien species than before. Velthari stood at the center, flanked by General Folkmar and other Council military leaders. Behind them, Archon Zephyrn's crystalline form pulsed with dark energy. "Humans of the third planet," Velthari said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You have defied the natural order of the galaxy. You have infected other species with your primitive ideas of resistance. This ends now." The alien gestured, and the display changed to show the massive fleet surrounding Earth. 10,000 ships carry the combined might of the Galactic Council. Your 47 vessels cannot prevail against such force. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift. Jiho stepped forward to the camera. Around the command center, every human present stood a little straighter. This was the moment they had been preparing for, the moment that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. 3 months ago, you demanded our surrender, Jiho said clearly. Our response was no. Today, facing your entire fleet, our response remains the same. No, he paused, looking directly into the camera. But we are not alone. As if summoned by his words, space around Earth suddenly filled with ships that hadn't been there moments before. Aquatic Federation vessels rose from the dark side of the moon where they had been hidden. The tree-like ships of the Botanical Confederacy emerged from the asteroid belt. Crystal-hulled miners from the silicon colonies appeared from behind Mars. 30-7 species had answered Earth's call. 3,000 ships now stood between the Council fleet and their target. In the crystal chamber, Velthari's perfect composure finally cracked completely. "Impossible," he whispered. "The fleet sensors showed no other ships. Human stealth technology," General Folkmar said grimly. "They shared it with the rebels?" But the real shock came when the Allied fleet was joined by ships from the Council Armada itself. Entire squadrons began breaking formation, their crews declaring for the rebellion. The Kara's defense force, still angry about their world's punishment, turned their weapons on their former allies. The deep space miners, tired of their resources being stolen, joined the growing revolt. What had been intended as humanity's execution was becoming the largest battle in galactic history. "All ships, this is Admiral Jiho Kim," he broadcast on all frequencies. "Today we fight not just for Earth, but for every world that has been forced to bow down to tyrants. Today we fight for freedom." The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Council's superior numbers meant nothing. When a third of their fleet was switching sides and another third was fighting with crews who no longer believed in their cause, Commander Taeyun led the human fleet in a series of coordinated strikes that had been planned with their alien allies. The Aquatic Federation's ships, designed for deep ocean warfare, proved deadly in the three-dimensional battle space of vacuum. The Botanical Confederacy's living vessels could repair damage in real time, making them nearly impossible to destroy. But it was the human ships that provided the crucial element, the willingness to take risks that no civilized species would consider. Earth's vessels drove deep into enemy formations, accepting terrible damage to create openings for their allies. The UES Incheon, Taeyun's flagship, led a desperate charge against the Council command ship. As alien fire tore through his hull, he maintained course, his weapons blazing at the massive vessel that carried General Thokmar. "This is for everyone who ever said no to a bully," he said as his ship's reactor overloaded. Taking the alien command vessel with it in a blast of nuclear fire, the tide of battle turned when the Silicon Colony's ships revealed their secret weapon, the ability to hack into Council computer systems and turn their own weapons against them. Suddenly, Council ships were firing on each other, their targeting systems compromised by creatures made of living crystal and quantum thought. But the real victory came when Archon Zephyr's ancient mind finally grasped what was happening. The Council's control over the galaxy wasn't being broken by superior firepower or better technology. It was being shattered by something far more dangerous, the idea that ordinary beings could say no to their oppressors and make it stick. "Retreat," the Archon commanded as its flagship shields failed under combined fire from a dozen species. "All ships withdraw to Council space immediately." The great fleet that had come to crush humanity's rebellion fled in disorder, leaving behind thousands of their ships and the bodies of their crews. But more importantly, they left behind the illusion of invincibility that had kept their empire together for 12,000 years. As the last Council ships disappeared into faster-than-light travel, a cheer went up from every ship in the Allied fleet. Humans, Aquatic Federation swimmers, Botanical Confederacy gardeners, Silicon Colony miners, all united in the joy of impossible victory. But Admiral Jiho Kim, standing in the ruins of the Terra Defense Command Center, knew that the real war was just beginning. Across the galaxy, species that had been slaves for millennia were rising up. Inspired by the knowledge that resistance was possible, the Galactic Council's empire was crumbling. And in its place something new was being born, something built. Not on fear and domination, but on the simple idea that had started it all. Sometimes, the most powerful word in the galaxy is no. 6 months after the Battle of Seoul, Jiho Kim stood in a very different kind of chamber than the Crystal Palace where the old Galactic Council had ruled. The new council chamber was built in the Centaurus sector, far from the core worlds where the ancient regime had held power. Instead of cold crystal and intimidating vastness, this space was warm and welcoming. Representatives from dozens of species sat in circles rather than rigid hierarchies, and sunlight from the system's twin stars streamed through transparent walls. Jaha wore a simple blue uniform with a small patch showing Earth's flag alongside the symbols of the Free Worlds Compact. The title on his badge read Secretary General, Terran Federation, a position he had never wanted, but couldn't refuse when the other species had insisted that humanity lead the new alliance. The old council demanded tribute from new species. He said to the assembled representatives, "We ask only that each world contribute what it can to our common defense and prosperity. The difference between tyranny and cooperation is simple. We ask," they demanded. "We accept no for an answer," they did not. In the front row, Chief Diplomat Una Park, now Ambassador General of the Free Worlds Compact, smiled at how naturally Jiho had taken to galactic politics. Beside her sat Strategic Advisor Minho Lee, who had become Earth's representative to the new council. His datapad was filled not with military assessments, but with trade agreements and cultural exchange programs. The chamber was full of faces that would have been impossible to imagine 6 months ago. Ambassador Reeftar of the Aquatic Federation, his tank of water gleaming in the starlight. Gruton of the Botanical Confederacy, his leaves rustling with approval. Even some former council species had sent representatives, eager to join a galactic government that asked for cooperation instead of demanding submission. Today marks the 6-month anniversary of our victory over tyranny, Jiho continued. But, more importantly, it marks the beginning of our real work, building a galaxy where every species has a voice, where every world controls its own destiny. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of different species cheered, chirped, clicked, and sang their approval. The sound was chaotic but somehow beautiful, the voice of freedom in all its messy, wonderful diversity, but the real measure of their success was happening far beyond this chamber. Across the galaxy, the revolution that had started with one word was still spreading. The old council's core worlds had become isolated and bitter, their populations trapped by leaders who refused to accept that their empire was finished. But even there, change was coming. Reports arrived daily of species declaring independence, of worlds throwing off their chains, of beings who had never known freedom suddenly discovering what it meant to choose their own path. After the formal session ended, Jiho retreated to his office overlooking the spaceport. Through the windows, he could see ships from hundreds of worlds coming and going, traders, diplomats, tourists, students, all moving freely through space that had once been the exclusive territory of council enforcers. A soft chime announced an incoming message. Jiho activated the holographic display, expecting another routine diplomatic communication. Instead, he found himself looking at a young alien being he didn't recognize. The creature had 6 arms, iridescent skin, and large eyes that seemed ancient despite its obvious youth. "Secretary General Kim," the being said in carefully pronounced English. "My name is—" The translation would be Spark. "I represent the Hexarch Collective from the Outer Spiral. We are WRE subjects of a regional council affiliated with the old Galactic hegemony." Jiho leaned forward, interested. The Outer Spiral was beyond even the Free Worlds Compact's current reach, thousands of light-years from Earth. 3 days ago, the Regional Council demanded increased tribute from our worlds, Spark continued. 60% of our resources, 40% of our population, complete submission to their authority. They said it was necessary to maintain order after the human contamination spread to our sector. Jiho felt his heart skip a beat. The same words, the same demands that had started this entire conflict. But now they were being made against species that had heard about Earth's response. Spark's large eyes seemed to look directly through the hologram at Jiho. Our assembly of worlds met for 3 days and nights. We discussed every option, every possibility, every consequence. In the end, we reached a unanimous decision. The young alien paused, and despite the vast distance between them, Jiho could feel the weight of the moment. "We told the Regional Council that we had heard about a small world that once faced the same demand. We told them that we had learned a new word from the humans of Earth. Our response to their demands was no." Jiho closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the full impact of what he was hearing. The revolution wasn't just spreading, it was accelerating, reaching parts of the galaxy that Earth had never even known existed. "The Regional Council has assembled a punishment fleet," Spark continued. "We have 47 ships to face there. 300. We do not ask for your help, Secretary General. We know you have your own challenges. But we wanted you to know that your word has traveled far, and it has given others the courage to say it too." The transmission ended, leaving Jiho alone with his thoughts. 47 ships against 300. The same odds Earth had faced in their first battle. But now, somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, another small fleet was preparing to fight for their freedom. Inspired by the knowledge that resistance was possible, Zhao activated his communication system and called for an emergency session of the Free Worlds Defense Committee. If the Hexarch Collective wanted to fight alone, that was their choice. But they wouldn't have to face 300 ships with 40-7. They would face 300 ships with 47, plus whatever fleet Earth and its allies could send to help. Later that evening, Jiho stood on the observation deck of the space station, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the old Galactic Council was plotting their return to power. Somewhere else, new species were discovering what it meant to be free. And in distant galaxies beyond their current reach, other young civilizations were learning That sometimes the most powerful weapon against tyranny was a simple word. Eh? Soft footstep behind him announced Yuna's arrival. She joined him at the viewport, following his gaze out into the infinite darkness. Any regrets? She asked quietly. Dachiho considered the question. 6 months ago, he had been a simple admiral protecting one small world. Now he was responsible for an alliance of dozens of species, fighting a war that spanned the entire galaxy. No, he said finally. We didn't choose this fight, but we're going to finish it. As if summoned by his words, another ship appeared in the distance, sleek and unfamiliar, flying the banner of a species Earth had never encountered. The revolution was still growing, still spreading, still carrying the simple message that had started it all. When tyranny demands submission, sometimes the only answer is no. And across the galaxy, that answer continued to echo, carrying hope to every world that had forgotten what freedom meant.